Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades, happy Sunday. It's October the 16th. Today was the gospel in the Novus Ordo Missae anyway, which identifies divorce and remarriage with adultery. Remember the one that Pope Francis's first set of synods, 2014-2015, defied. Our Lord Jesus says that if you divorce your wife and remarry another, it's adultery. And Francis and all kinds of liberal priests throughout the world, including priests locally here, said, well, Jesus needed to get with the times. And in April of 2016, Pope Francis says, basically, you can receive communion if you're divorced and remarried committing adultery, meaning it's not a mortal sin, meaning go ahead and do it. Later that year in 2016, he'd used that synod process through a massage process, a normalization of mortal sin, a slow incremental normalization of mortal sin, to eventually, even though it was semi-definitive in April 2016, when he finally released the post-synodal apostolic exhortation called Amoris Laetitia, he left that even a little vague. It's a process of incrementally getting less vague about the normalization of heresy or mortal sin. In September of 2016, he responded to dubiae from Buenos Aires bishops who said, are you saying we can give communion to adulterers? And he said, yeah, you have the only correct interpretation. So that's today, Sunday. It's important because breaking news from the synod on today's Sunday is, I'm counting this as synod news, Father Timothy Radcliffe, who is currently leading the spiritual retreats for the ongoing synod, which began October 2nd of, this past week. He's leading the synod on synodality, like retreats. They do them every so often. He is going to be a cardinal, along with others at Francis's, sixth or seventh consistory of cardinals? He has made so many cardinals. Every 2 years, he holds a new consistory to make new cardinals. Catholic Herald reports Timothy Radcliffe, OP, he is a Dominican, former head of the order, named cardinal in the latest round of Pope's Red Hat handouts. Now, I love St. Thomas. I love the Dominican schoolmen, but don't make the mistake of thinking that they are some bastion of conservative thought, because they got infiltrated just like the Jesuits did. Timothy Radcliffe used to be the head of them. Pope Francis on Sunday, today, announced a consistory in December for the creation of 21 new cardinals from all over the world, representing yet again the Pope's love of the peripheries and his inclination to reward key allies. The key ally under question, I'm going to skip a little bit, is Father Timothy Radcliffe. The new cardinal designates showcase the Pope's love of the global peripheries, featuring appointees from Peru, Ecuador, Iran, Japan, Ivory Coast, Algeria, Serbia, and more. Aside from a handful of Italians, only 2 of the new cardinals, Dominican preacher Timothy Radcliffe, former Master General of the Dominican Order, and Archbishop Francis Leo of Toronto, come from the West, signaling Francis's ongoing push to shift the leadership of the Church away from being primarily Western. Radcliffe is currently leading the spiritual retreats for the Pope's October 2nd to 27th Synod on Bishops on Synodality. Francis's new cardinal appointees also represent another instance of him handing a red hat to individuals who have been key allies in his papacy, including Radcliffe. Father Fabio Baggio, Under Secretary of the Migrants and Refugees section of the Dicastery for promoting integral human development, and Monsignor George Kuvakad of India, who is in charge of organizing papal trips. Also on the list is Archbishop Carlos Castillo of Lima, who has had the challenging task of navigating fallout from the scandals surrounding the Peru-based Sodalitium Christianae Vitae, which is currently under Vatican investigation. I'd read you the full list of appointees. Radcliffe is the biggest one. He's a big LMNOP advocate. We've covered him lots on this show. Always been a little surprised he's not a cardinal. Well, now he is. Francis didn't miss that twice. There are currently 236 cardinals, of whom 122, just about half, are under 80 and are therefore eligible to vote in the next conclave. 2 of those cardinals will age out by the end of the next year. And Timothy Radcliffe, by the way, is over 80, so he will not be able to vote. He's a very pro-LMNOP cardinal, like all of the close friends of Francis are. Like Tucho Fernandez, when he got the nod to be the prefect for the Holy Office. I don't call it the CDF or DDF anymore. I'm done with that. It's just the Holy Office. Get this. With the exception of 2021, Pope Francis has held a consistory every year of his 11-year papacy. This year's consistory will be his 10th. I thought it was like the 6th or 7th. Holy cow. Okay, that's remarkable. He has made more cardinals than any pope on recent record. Why? Because personnel is policy. So that story broke just early this morning, which meant, Rome evening on Sunday after 3 or 4 days of the synod. That is news because it's one of the guys, one of the key personages at the synod. The other two, the two already cardinals that basically run the synod are Cardinals Gresh and Hollerish. And let me tend to what I think the real news from the synod is so far. So in this is United States Conference of Bishops on October the 4th, which was, Friday. Vatican doctrinal chief tells synod it's not time for women deacons. Now, Pope-splainers were celebrating. And what I said on Friday when Pope-splainers were celebrating was, without even having read them until yesterday, early morning today, I was saying, read the articles. Read the articles. Because I told you over a year ago, a couple days before last year's 2023 session of the synod began, Francis is not going to make sacramental deaconettes. That's too closed off. That is not how, over the last 60 years, anything by the Ronerites, the St. Gallen mafioso types, have been done. They always do something else. So you have to read the fine print. And I was literally saying that on Friday when this story broke. I didn't have time to look at it because we were celebrating our twins' birthday in the house. And then I read the fine print yesterday and today, and it said exactly what I said over a year ago it would say. Stick around for that show, that episode, which is coming up. It says exactly what I've been telling you all. It is that they are going to do deaconettes. They're just not going to be sacramental. I told you this in September 30th, 2023. I said, this is what they're going to do. I'll explain how in this show. And it's more or less confirmed. The breaking news on Friday was Tucho Fernandez, another one of Francis's cardinal appointees, who was appointed and made, number 2 in the church, the doctrinal chief, head of the Holy Office. They rolled out worldwide reports that go, it's not time for women deacons. I want to make an analogy here. They did this in 2014 and 2015 several times. They said, we are not going to give communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. We're not going to do it. And they would have a kind of press briefing, or, that's sort of outdated with the internet, but like a news drop where there would be, a dozen articles written at a dozen Catholic online rags that would say stuff like Vatican doctrinal chief says no for communion for divorced and civilly remarried, even though all the conservatives were saying they're going to do that. They did this a lot throughout late 2014, all of 2015, even early 2016, before the post-synodal exhortation came out. Lots and lots. They're digging a hole. And then, of course, what did they do? They did precisely what they said they weren't going to do. They gave communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. But in a slightly altered form with the internal forum. They said it won't be every single one, even though it really will. It won't be every single adulterer out there can get communion. and it's really squishy, and you have to be in the internal forum, which is a dialogue between you and your priest and your bishop. So they could say, yeah, it's not just a carte blanche, but that's what it is, and that's what it became, 100%. Well, what they've done with women deacons, let's just call them deaconettes, ever since the Amazon Synod, 2019, October, 5 years ago, they said, no, it's not that. It's not what we're going to do. But then they made an attachment to the final synod document that said, we're going to study this. It's a good idea. We're going to keep it open. And after 2019, all the Pope splainers said, see, they're not going to do it. No, but look at this attachment. They said they like the idea and they're going to do it. Then, over the last 5 years, you've had Cardinals Gresh and Hollerish, who are in charge of this synod, aside from Francis. They're in charge of this synod, saying we're going to do women deacons. And I remember I was on a walk with Steph around our neighborhood, the little circuit, not the bigger circuit. I remember right where I was coming down the hill. And I was like, I know what they're going to do. I just got it. I just got a ping from the Holy Spirit. It's the equivalent. I don't know why it took me so long to see it. This was last September, right before last year's synod began. I said, they're going to say no. They're going to say a hard no to sacramental women deacons. Hard no. And they're going to circulate that. And I said this on a video, so I'm not just claiming I said it. I said it on a video September 30th of last year. And very specifically, here's what they're going to do. Go back and check that video from September 30th. It's up on my channel. You just have to go scan by date. I'm going to say no to deacons, deaconettes, whatever, deaconesses, let's call them the sacramental form, because you can't do that. A no is a no. Hey, we acknowledge the rules. We're revolutionaries, but we acknowledge the rules. And then, but then what are they going to do? They're going to say, but there's authority in women, and there were non-sacramental deacons, women deacons, like Susanna and Joanna in the Acts of the Apostles and the New Testament. And they're going to say, so we can have those. And for just to straighten the historical record, Susanna and Joanna were just deacons in the sense that deacon generically, when it's not sacramental, deacon is a Greek word, literally just means helper, food preparer in context. They just made food for the men, Christians. That's all they did. And yeah, they actually were named in the New Testament. That's kind of a big deal. Maybe they did a little more than that. Maybe they're kind of special women in some sense. But what I said on September the 30th is, so they're going to make a third sense of deacon, not just deacon meaning helper woman, helpmeet, which is the unflattering view from a feminist point of view of the unflattering view of women that the church has always harbored, women not having positions of authority. Note the word authority. That's the first sense. The second sense of deacon is what you and I think it means, a sacramental, third order diaconate, permanent diaconate. And they're going to say no to that. But then they're going to create a third type of deacon, which will slot between, conceptually, by distinction of degree, between those first two types of deacons. And it will basically, because it's a binary concept, what level of authority do these women have, even if they're not sacramental deacons? You can just say it's not a sacrament, which is what they're going to do. But then they're going to share in all of the ergonomics, that is to say, all of the functions of female deacons, of male sacramental deacons. The only difference will be that the female deaconettes don't ever have the laying on of hands. And eventually they'll get that too, but that might be a generation or two or whatever. This is how Vatican II works. I called all of this in a video on September 30th of last year, and I think I followed up in a video October the 2nd. I said all of this. Those videos are still up. In other videos, I've played me saying that, where I was saying it's vindicating. Now listen to this article from the USCCB. Vatican doctrinal chief tells Synod it's not time for women deacons. In March, Pope Francis announced that he was setting up 10 study groups made up of experts from around the world to deepen reflection on complicated or controversial issues raised during the 2023 session of the Synod of Bishops on Synodality. The groups reported to Synod members this week. Rushing to open the diaconate to women in the Catholic Church would short-circuit a necessary reflection on the relationship between ordained ministry meaning sacrament. Remember, or the O word, ordained, always means it's the sacramental version. The relationship between ordained ministry and charismatic leadership, particularly as it impacts the participation of women in the church, said the head of Vatican's doctrinal office. That's Tuccio. Even they don't know what to call it. You can call it the DDF. Used to be called the CDF. Before that, it was called the Holy Office. I just call it the Holy Office. On the question of women deacons, quote, "We know the public position of the Pope, who does not consider the question mature," end quote. Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect for the Holy Office, told members of the Synod of Bishops on October the 2nd. This is the opening day of the Synod that he said that. And Pope splinters went crazy. And I said, read the fine print, read the fine print. Quote, "The opportunity for a deepening remains open," but it gets much better than that. But that's something right there. He continues, "But in the mind of the Holy Father, there are other issues still to be deepened and resolved before rushing to speak of a possible diaconate for some women," he said. You see how they're even saying some women, not all women, you know? They're already softening the ground. And they have been for 5 years. Otherwise, the diaconate becomes a kind of consolation for some women, and the most decisive question of the participation of women in the church remains unanswered. End quote. After the first assembly of the Synod on Synodality in 2023, Pope Francis set up 10 study groups to reflect more deeply on some of the most controversial or complicated questions raised during the Synod process. Opening the diaconate to women and ensuring they have decision-making roles in the church was one of those questions, as was ministry to LMNOPQ people, how bishops are chosen, and improving seminary education. Brief videos about each group's work were shown to the assembly, except for Cardinal Fernandez's group, the head group, on women's ministry. Each video included the names and photos of the group's members, but not for Tuccio's group. The Vatican published written reports from each group, but leaders also spoke to the assembly about their progress. Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich, Relator General of the Synod, introduced the group leaders to the assembly and told Synod members that the groups were, quote, "companions on the journey toward helping all Catholics listen to the Holy Spirit and each other, value each other's experiences and talents and collaborate in sharing the gospel." In his written report, Cardinal Fernandez said that at this point, his dicastery, quote, "judges that there is still no room for a positive decision by the magisterium regarding the access of women to the diaconate, still." But hold on, that's a comma, not a period. "Understood as a degree of the sacrament of holy orders." And stop. But, he wrote, the dicastery thinks a, quote, "particularly interesting way forward would be," quote, I hope I didn't give him this idea if he saw my video from me. No, of course not. But he wrote that, I mean, you know what I'm thinking when I saw this, because I called it. I mean, how dare me?
How dare you?
I literally called this. But he wrote that they're not that hard to figure out. You just can't be a moron pope-splainer about it. They're going to do what they were in place there to do. But, he wrote, the dicastery thinks a particularly interesting way forward would be, quote, "to analyze in depth the lives of some women who, in both the early and recent history of the church, have exercised genuine authority." So they'll have genuine authority, not just influence, but authority. It just won't be sacramental. "And power in support of the church's mission," end quote. Their, quote, "authority or power was not tied to sacramental consecration."
There it is. Boom.
I mean, come on, people. Give me my flowers on this one. Their authority or power was not tied to sacramental consecration, as would be in the case, at least today, with diaconal ordination, the report said.